information is power. So the more information that you have to make an informed decision, the better off you're going to be. And so as we evolved, we're really information brokers. We sell information. And so being able to ascertain and accumulate that important information to help the litigation team make those poignant, tough decisions, you can litigate it and push paper all day long. But at the end of the day, the information comes from not from the internet, it comes from people.
So today we've got Brian Bauer, founder and president of PHENIX Investigations, the most positively reviewed PI firm on Google and one of the largest in the country. Every business person knows you don't get to the top of the mountain overnight. So I'd like to talk today about the climb. Brian, obviously, I've been doing marketing for you for a long time now. I know a lot about what PHENIX is doing today, how you operate, the types of clients you serve, but we haven't talked a lot about what was going on 30 years ago. You've changed, the world's changed, so I'd like to kind of get some perspective on what you were doing when you started and how things evolved.
Yeah, so I'm not sure I can beat that intro, but I appreciate the kind words. Yeah, a little bit of background about me. My name's Brian Bauer. I'm the founder, founded PHENIX Investigations over 30 years ago. I started out, as many college grads do, struggling, trying to make ends meet. And so I had a buddy who said, hey, we need a work comp surveillance to follow these guys around. So I did that part-time, and then immediately realized, hey, this is my calling. A big outdoorsman and a hunter, and I always just thought it was the coolest thing to this day of hunting the number one predator, which is man. And so nothing more rewarding than following somebody that's trying to beat up the insurance company and getting them water skiing and shutting off their water as it relates to. So I started out working for a company for a few years to realize, you know what, I can do this on my own. And so I went and got a half of an employee, rented a little tiny office in the Chamber of Commerce building. Thought, at that time, it was so important to have the zip code in the geographic area. The internet didn't exist then, so it was who could be the top of the telephone book. And
AAA investigations.
So absolutely. So I just started, had a few people working for me part-time, and I convinced 5 people to loan me $2,000 each. I took out 3 credit cards on cash advances at about 35%. So probably not the most business advice, but in the true entrepreneurial spirit, I started that way. Was proud after a year to be able to pay back all those investors who probably made enough to buy a Starbucks cup of coffee. But so I started there very small and kind of went from there. So
wild. I wanted to go back to, were you working, you mentioned when you were 21, you worked for a little bit at a place. Was that a private investigation firm?
Yeah, when I first started out, I was a road warrior. I was crisscrossing multiple states, performing surveillance, living out of my surveillance van, going from case to case, and was a bit of a nomad. Moved to Indianapolis, didn't know a soul, and then quickly again realized, hey, this is something that I want to do. And so as I started, my motivation was never money. My motivation was, 1, to always catch the bad guy, and 2, a lot of people had said that I didn't know what I was doing and that I was going to fail. And some of that was true in the beginning. I didn't know what I was doing, but the motivation ultimately is what drove me from the competition, not from a money perspective, but, ultimately at the end of the day, just to prove those people wrong. And I think that I'm still cut from that cloth to this day.
Gosh, I only know you now, and thinking of you as someone else's employee is insane to me. 22, 23-year-old Brian Bauer, how are you with a manager? and a boss. What was that like?
Babe in the woods. I would say I was always very tenacious and very competitive, but it truly was early on school of hard knocks, making lots of mistakes. Some of my fondest memories are back in the day, starting out when everything was, what time does the mailman get here? And will there be a check in there to make payroll to survive? Or at the time was, hey, can we afford to purchase a fax machine? Type of thing. So always, as many entrepreneurs, very touch and go in the beginning, but hard work and grind and perseverance, typically will win the day.
So that answers the question, did you come for money, as a very big no. How many years was it for you before you stopped being terrified that it was all going to fall apart? I think most entrepreneurs in the early stage, you have to kind of fake the confidence for the people around you, but there's always this sleepless night of, oh my God, is this all going to tumble? Did you have that feeling?
Just every day, just so, when I first started, after that first year, there was a lot of people that saying this guy's crazy. He's working 90 hours a week. He could make more money working at McDonald's, which was true. I was able to pay back my investors the first year. And then I recall the second year working another 90 hours a week, grinding to where what was left in the company checkbook was $10,000 that I was able to pay myself a bonus, where I wrote that check to myself and I drove around with that check for about 3 days before I deposited, because it was the largest amount of money that I had ever seen in my name. And then the third year really took off, and I think it was $500,000 or more.
So it was year three when you started pulling some actual money.
Yeah, year three is really where it took off. Early on in my career, as we all think, hey, I gotta dominate locally, and but as the internet came along, really realizing, hey, it's a big world out there, and I'm probably not going to survive just providing investigations for local attorneys. So that's where I started to change my mindset and do investigations nationwide.
So talk a little bit about the local attorney work in the first few years. So what types of investigations were you doing mostly? Was it types of insurance surveillance, or was it all over the place?
Yeah, good question. So I started out primarily doing surveillance work, which a lot of investigators still do to this day. And so that was working with lots of claims adjusters, doing that surveillance. That space is very competitive. And so over time, as I blossomed and gained more experience, I realized it was a big, bright world out there, and it wasn't just doing investigations.
How long was it before you broke out of primarily doing the surveillance and insurance kind of stuff?
Yeah, I would probably say through the evolution, probably 5 years in, I started to dabble in more areas, working directly with attorneys, and then lots of different shapes and sizes, internal theft investigations, embezzlement, asset investigations, accident investigations. And so I started to really transition away from just steady insurance work and trying to open it up for all different types of investigations.
So I know your team, today does a lot of work for private citizens, and you primarily focus on, attorneys and corporate stuff. It sounds like it's been like that for 25 years now. Your personal focus has been attorneys and businesses.
Yeah, primarily what we will work with is B2B types of clients, attorneys, businesses. Occasionally will work with those domestic types of clients, but those clients are on the wealthier side and have their own businesses and business people as well.
So, obviously from the marketing perspective, I always wonder, which is the hardest for every entrepreneur. How did you get your first, 50 customers? Was it beating doors, referrals? What were you doing?
I recall back in the day buying all of this and creating all of this nice marketing material to where it was so nice and it was so expensive. You never wanted to send it to anybody because it was one of those things where, oh, I'm going to run out of this, and it costs money. But um, really, back in the day, it was word of mouth, mailing those brochures, getting the word out, pressing the flash to those different types of associations and things, and just meeting people and convincing them, hey, don't give me all of your work. Just go ahead and give me one or two of your cases, and let us show you, what our capabilities are, and then kind of take it from there.
When you look back, do you have like a first big case that was an outlier from the type of work you had done?
You'll always remember your first, as they say, right? And so this was early in my career, and I had mailed a brochure flyer to a large scale trucking company. And the woman put it in a filing cabinet and called 3 years later off of that dollar brochure and retained us to do an investigation on a manager that they received a tip on, that of all things might be stealing flour. And
Baking flour?
baking flour. And so now this company had rail cars coming, baking flour, and that would go to the Hershey's of the world and Entenmann's and these large bakeries. And it just so happened that this location was in the Bronx in New York. And so as we were hired to look into this person, because there was a tip that maybe he might be up to no good, as we ran this individual's background, we found 6 or 7 different businesses under this person's name. And as I reached out to corporate and said, hey, do you do any business with these 7 businesses? They looked it up and said, yeah, we do business with all 7 of these businesses, although this was a manager, an employee of ours. And as we started to look, there was millions of dollars paid out over time to these different businesses. So as we performed surveillance in the Bronx, as you could just imagine, for a period of time, we were able to show that none of these services were being provided, that these were dummy invoices. He, as the manager, was approving these invoices as work being paid. So ultimately, as we gained all the information, we coordinated it with the FBI. We convinced him to fly to Northern Indiana to have his corporate meeting. His wife ran the business in the Bronx, and then we raided the business when he was there in Indiana. The FBI interviewed him in Northern Indiana, and the FBI raided his facility in the Bronx. And ultimately, I think he did something like 5 years in prison. So we did that investigation from A to Z, and I think, ultimately at the end of the day, that was north of $350,000 investigation, and that just kind of took off from there. So,
What year was that?
oh, you're really dating me now. I would probably say 2099, something like that.
Oh my
25
gosh.
years ago.
What were the emotions around that when your typical case looked more like catching a workman's comp guy playing golf or something, when then you ring up a $350,000 investigation like that?
Yeah, so that was the epiphany, and then the light bulb came on, I should say, and ultimately determined, hey, this has tremendous value. This person was stealing millions, was able to thwart and stop, put the bad guy in jail, and realize this is something that law enforcement couldn't have done, wouldn't have done, and to quickly realize, hey, there's a huge niche here and a need. And so, as we started to do those investigations and really wearing the white hat and solving the problems for the clients, that's really where we took off.
So that was the moment that you felt like you had something big here, and it was in the rearview mirror, focusing on the piddly diddly stuff in, your local area.
Yeah, exactly. As we evolved, we realized, and even to this day, information is power. So the more information that you have to make an informed decision, the better off you're going to be. And so as we evolved, we're really information brokers. We sell information. And so being able to ascertain and accumulate that important information to help the litigation team make those um, poignant, tough decisions, you can litigate it and push paper all day long. But at the end of the day, the information comes from not from the internet, it comes from people. And so this example that I give you in the Bronx, and I don't know if you ever saw the movie War Dogs or not,
Yeah, awesome.
right? And so
Yeah.
this was if you recall in the movie War Dogs, it all fell apart because they didn't pay the box man the $100,000, right? Well, this investigation all started because he didn't pay the truck driver for one of these illegal loads for a couple $100.
Oh my God.
So by screwing the driver dropped a dime, which started the investigation and started to look into it. To not only did this individual create all of these dummy companies, but he would also siphon flour off of these rail cars, accumulate it in another tanker, a truck, and then he would sell it on the open market for cash. So in our world, you need to understand we as consumers probably pay 25% more for anything that we purchase, and it's all due to fraud and
Mhm.
theft. And so is like death and taxes, it's not going to go away, that people are going to screw over people.
Yeah.
Talking about the oldest profession in the world, that's one of those. Um,
Yeah, it's like I read somewhere, humans are the only mammal capable of emotional deceit. We're the only ones that go around scamming and tricking each other like that.
yeah, absolutely. And we live in a world now that people and companies run into the situation to where they think we can run to law enforcement and law enforcement will help us because this is a crime. We're the victim. But ultimately, law enforcement gets to the point to where one, we don't have maybe the experience or the brain power. Two, if we do it for your company, Scott, then there's 10 other companies down the street that want to do it for us. And so, hey, this is really a civil matter. And so what we'll do is not only do the whole investigation, but we will put a nice little bow on that investigation and we will take it to law enforcement and we will force law enforcement to act upon that. So we'll serve that up on a silver platter, and oftentimes we'll have to go over law enforcement's head and go to the prosecutor's office or the attorney general's office and say, "Hey, there's a major crime here." But we live in a world that there's so much of this going on that it's just really triage at this point.
That's really interesting. So when you mentioned that the police are not able to do this kind of work, I had a question loading of why. But is it really just a bigger version of the equivalent of when I call the police and say my car was broken into, they just laugh and come in and write a report and nothing happens?
Yeah, so I think over the years, and I won't say all agencies, but a lot of them have zero accountability. So there's no motivation within our law enforcement system. That's local, state, all the way up to federal, to where hey, I don't get anything. I don't get any kudos or that a boys or what have you. And so, hey, there's just going to be more, and it's just constantly backfilling for what it is that I do. And so there's very little motivation there. So on that same example that I gave you, when I took that to the federal government, they were disinterested until I gave them the entire investigation, showed them, connected the dots, showed the evidence. And then ultimately, when they raided him, the FBI agent was honest and said, Brian, what you did in 2 months would take this agency 2 years to do.
That's wild. Knowing that most PI firms are small, they've got a few people there, 95% of them under 5 people. What is it about Phoenix Investigations that leaves you equipped to do things like this, like solve the big problems, where almost all of the other shops seem to not get to that level?
Yeah, I think there's lots and lots of great investigators out there, but first and foremost, I learned early on, you better be a good business person and a good marketer first, and
Mhm.
you better have a funnel of work in order to perform, because you can be the best damn investigator out there, but if you don't have any work to do, it's for naught. So the challenge early on is being able to get your name out there, being able to market, and then realize, and I think a lot of investigators undervalue their services. And so over the years, we've been able to figure out that what we provide has tremendous value, sometimes way more than what they can provide on the litigation side. And so coaching attorneys to say, we make a really good partnership. We can't do what you do and practice law and argue these cases, but Mr. Attorney, you can't do what we do either. Right. And so to be able to show them and have witnesses in order to interview and obtain information. And we live in a world now where we just think, hey, Google it and we'll know everything there is about Scott. But all the good, meaty stuff is about finding Scott's ex, or somebody that is an axe to grind, or was in his circle of trust, or what have you. And that's where the real information comes. So really what I love about investigations is it's a Rubik's Cube. You never come to a dead end. It's just the T. And how can you be creative, and the information is out there, and just how tenacious can you be in order to obtain that information?
So, Brian, we got time for one more question, and I think I want to close with this. There's 100 hours worth of things that you could tell attorneys about what you can do. If you had one or two sentences to say to attorneys out there who have thought about using a private investigator but have not, why should they give you a call?
Yeah, good question. What I would say to them is, what do you have to lose? If you gain no traction, you're still where you started from. But risk versus reward um, is potentially huge. So I would absolutely say we can make a great partnership. And so, yeah, I would say just give it a try, whether it's with PHENIX or someone else. And if you find that good investigator, just like any other practitioner, it can be really good in the way of litigation support and ultimately make you as the attorney look better.
So it doesn't hurt to ask, find out what PIs can do. You might say information is power. So as every conversation we have, we could go on for hours. I'm really excited about the next episode where we want to hear some more war stories, some more insights, and more reasons why we should be looking at this industry a little closer. Brian, thanks for hopping on. I really appreciate it today. Excited to chat next time.
Absolutely. Look forward to the next one.